It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun, Haney, your host here on this Friday edition of the show. Hey, thanks so much for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your work day. And a big shout out to everybody also listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast, no matter where you are, Canada, the U.S., or beyond. And it's great to have you here. Today, it's Friday. We got a beef market update with Anne Wasko. We're going to find out about some of the updated trade numbers. We're also going to hear what's happening with pricing. And a lot of stuff happening. This is placements in Canada. Definitely, she's going to talk about this, but definitely extending the fall run. The fall run has moved into summer, very, very much drought related. So we'll get all the ins and outs of that with Anne Wasko today on RealAg Radio. We've also got a RealAg Issues panel. Kelvin, Heppner, Lyndsey Smith will be here. We're going to talk about, Minister MacAulay out and about talking to farmers and ranchers across Western Canada, which is always, I think, appreciated by the West. We've also got a cabinet meeting, a retreat next week. It'll be held in PEI. We're going to talk about my discussion with Brian Burke, hockey executive who spoke at CBIC this week. Got some updates on Bill 282, that supply management bill. So yeah, lots of stuff to discuss here with the panel and really, really looking forward to it. If you have any feedback on the program, we would love to hear from you. You can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find us across all the different social media platforms, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Threads. We're across all of them. And you can do that by just searching Real Agriculture. It's our common username across all those platforms. Or you can call the RealAg feedback line. Now, the number is 855-776-6147. One of the longest standing segments we've done at RealAgriculture.com and RealAg Radio is the beef market update. And Anne Wasko is standing by. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're talking cattle. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
Does your N stabilizer contain an active ingredient load high enough to be agronomically effective? If not, it could be costing you time and money. If you're putting down a nitrogen stabilizer, put your trust in Koch Agronomic Services. Solutions like Super U, Tribune, and Anvil. Each delivers high active ingredient concentrations that low-rate products just can't match. Compare how imitator products stack up to agronomically effective solutions at defendyourn.ca.
The Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com has everything you need to get your crop off to a great start and a strong finish. Whether you're growing chickpeas, faba beans, lentils, or peas, you'll get all the latest and best agronomic information at PulseSchool.com. A library of top-notch agronomy videos from industry experts available on demand at your fingertips. Visit the Pulse School, brought to you by BASF on RealAgriculture.com.
Infuse some energy into your next corporate event, customer meeting, or conference with RealAg Radio, Canada's national agriculture radio show. Create a unique experience at your next event with host Shaun Haney, broadcasting RealAg Radio live on Sirius XM, featuring exciting guests, captivating interviews, and the latest news from the agriculture community. Contact advertising at realagriculture.com or call 587-787-1795 to book your on location with RealAg Radio today.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on this Friday. Let's dig into the cattle markets. It's now time for a beef market update with Anne Wasko, the Gateway Livestock Exchange. Anne, how are you doing on this Friday?
I am doing good, but I'm going to also add, because I was listening this week, I also do not have a present for you.
Yeah. That was extremely nice of Todd Miller. And if you missed Wednesday's show where we broadcasted live from the Canadian Beef Industry Conference, one of the guests was Todd Miller, CEO of Tech Canada, and he brought me a gift as a guest on the show. This is a nice. Maybe this is like a new thing he started.
I don't think it should go to your head. I'm just going to leave it at that.
Well, yes, that is. We'll make sure it doesn't. Okay, now we are midway in August, and this cattle market is something. Give us an update where we are with prices on both sides of the border.
Okay. Well, first of all, in the U.S. this week, markets were a little bit lower, 1 to 2 lower here at the close. So we'll call the South 178 to 179, and in the North 185 to 187 live. Their dress trade 293 to 294 delivered. So off a little bit from where they had been. But, Shaun, that market in the U.S. had really chopped sideways for pretty much 6 weeks, which for the summer is not typical. The cutout, this is, finally we got some action on that wholesale price. So the choice cutout last night closed at $3.14. That's $12 higher than last week's close. And finally, these smaller kills that we've been seeing in the U.S. finally led to this strengthening in the cutout. Smaller beef production, higher cutout price. So that's happened. It's just taken a little longer than most people thought. It also, from a timing perspective, Shaun, is really, really good for the interest for beef sales ahead of Labor Day. So typically we kind of get this improvement in leading into Labor Day, and so this fits that pretty good. Locally, just to finish on the prices, our Fed market here in Western Canada was pretty much steady, we'll call it, $3.88 to $3.93 delivered, dressed, meaning that Canfax will probably come out with a live average later today around that $2.34. That's how we finish up.
Okay, can demand sustain a higher cutout? Like, how should we view this from an overall market working, all these variables connecting together?
Well, and I'm sure everyone that was at the conference, if you were listening to Brenda Grant's presentation, and she would have talked about demand, but certainly it's a measurement of two pieces, supply and price. And so certainly with that smaller production that we're seeing on both sides of the border and now higher prices, it's going to be a weighting of those two things. So right now to see the cutout still running at levels which are historically high for this time of year, that would still lead us to be able to say that beef demand is still certainly holding its own. That's still a question though in all of our minds as we go further down, deeper into 23, and on into 2024 as consumers continue to feel the pinch in terms of higher interest rates and basically all of their costs in terms of housing and food and all the rest of it. But today, Shaun, I think we can confidently still say demand is good for beef.
Do you have some trade data to share with us?
Yeah. So, well, maybe, do you mind? I just wanted to kind of remind folks that we've got a cattle on feed report coming out later today for the U.S. But let me just go there first before I forget. We've got the trade expectations for the August 1 U.S. report on feed, 98.4% of last year, July placements, 94.5%, and July marketings, 94.8%. So all those numbers, the futures have basically prepared for smaller numbers, smaller supplies coming out of the report. And so that's what we'll see happens later today. And I also just wanted to share this one comment. In Canada, we had our cattle on feed report. Canfax released it last Friday. And one of the things that I think we'll see is very different from the U.S. report was we are clearly showing in Western Canada the impact of the drought. July placements were up substantially in that report, and not quite at the 2021 drought levels, but certainly well up from last year and the second biggest July placement since 2006. So it's clearly showing in our on-feed reports what's going on here in Western Canada.
Long term, that's not good.
What it does, Shaun, it stretches and makes our placement pattern longer. We're going to start placing now instead of just a condensed fall run. We're going to have a fall run that goes from June to December. So, I guess you can look at it from a few different ways, but we can't place them twice. I guess I would say that.
No. Okay, trade data.
Okay, finish up on the trade data. StatsCan released the June beef export numbers for Canada. We were down 12%. Not a big surprise because we've been talking about the smaller production. It's going to mean smaller exports, I think. Year to date, we're still just down 3%, but we're going to continue to to kind of kick at that number. This was the fourth consecutive month of smaller exports, but really no surprise. Like I said, fed production is down 8%. Total beef production in Canada is down 6%. Sales to the U.S. were down 5%, to Japan down 43%, and to Mexico they were still up 52%.
Why are we down so much to Japan?
Japan has really been struggling. U.S. trade is also down into Japan. So I think, just looking at the whole economic picture in terms of where beef is moving from and to. Remember, we've got some of the highest priced beef in the world right now in North America, and it's not moving well into a market that's struggling on the economic side. Okay.
I don't think you gave the number of feeder cattle imports.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I did want to finish up. We haven't talked about this much lately, but we did see a big jump in feeder cattle imports into Canada from the U.S. in the month of June. They hit 29,000 head. Last year, there were only 11,000 head in July, in June. So that's a big year-over-year jump. And, of course, a big net import of feeder cattle when you look at exports and imports together. Year to date, we're sitting as a net importer of feeder cattle to the tune of 76,000 head. So we continue to see month after month a pretty regular supply of feeder cattle moving north from the U.S. into Canada.
Yeah, market conditions have to line up in order for that to make sense. But it would sort of seem that going forward, this is going to be more of the norm that we're a net feeder cattle importer. Is that too strong of a statement to make at this point?
Well, I think you're on to something. Certainly the cow herd's not getting any bigger in Canada. So if feedlots want to fill pens, and certainly when you look at the amount that we continue to add pen space, especially in Western Canada, that seems to be a part of the new supply of how you fill pens.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll be following it as always. Anne, have yourself a great weekend. Really appreciate it.
Okay, you too, Shaun. Thank you.
We'll be back with more of RealAg Radio here on this Friday. We'll be joined for the RealAg Issues panel by Kelvin Heppner and Lyndsey Smith right after this.
There's a reason we call it the Corn School. Videos on everything from planter setup, weed control, field trial results, yield strategies, and so much more. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com has the information and advice you need to help you succeed. Brought to you by Pride Seeds and BASF, Corn School episodes are available at cornschool.com, from RealAgriculture.com, or as a podcast from your favorite streaming service. Download the latest podcast today.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin, host of the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com. Throughout the year, on the Soybean School, we'll bring you timely agronomic video content from planting to harvest, from the latest agronomic research to the latest in production technology. Check out our massive video library on YouTube, RealAgriculture.com, or download the audio podcast versions wherever you get your podcasts. The Soybean School is brought to you by Pride Seeds, BASF, and Syngenta Canada.
It's now time for the RealAg Issues panel. This segment's brought to you by Granubor from U.S. Borax. Ask for it by name. Go to borax.com. Up first, it's Lyndsey Smith coming out of Ottawa, Ontario. Lyndsey, how are you doing this week?
Not bad. I'm fighting a bit of, kennel cough or something. So it's been a roller coaster of a week, let me tell you. But we got some hay made.
Did you really? It quit raining.
Well, yeah, for about 48 hours, but it did manage. We didn't actually get it all rolled up. It did start to rain on it last night. So
good hay or just marginal?
It's sheep feed, and that's okay. That's all we need.
Okay, so how sensitive? That's what I'm looking for. How sensitive are sheep to the quality of the hay?
Oh, very. I mean, and we don't feed garbage by any means. Of course not. Garbage in, garbage out. But we're not trying to make milk, I guess, is the key. When our sheep are lactating on grass because they lamb in the spring. And so we are just in maintenance mode for the most part over the winter. So we don't need rocket fuel. So when I say it's sheep feed, it means it's, probably a little more mature. It's more like beef cow hay than dairy hay, I guess is the difference.
Makes sense to me. By the way, last weekend, we went out for supper, and I had at a local restaurant in Lethbridge, I had a tremendous plate of sheep, or not sheep, but lamb gnocchi.
Oh, I do appreciate this about you, Shaun. Just about everywhere we go, if there's lamb on the menu, you'll order it.
I do.
I'm quite proud of you.
True story. Yeah. I don't get it at home, so I got to get it outside the house.
That's right.
Yeah.
And more people should do it.
Yeah.
Amen.
Okay, also joining us is Kelvin Heppner out of Altona, Manitoba. Kelvin, how are you doing?
Doing well here, Shaun. The wind is howling from the south today. It's nice and warm. Crops are moving along after kind of stalling out here the last couple of weeks.
Have you had this heat wave? We were 38 degrees Celsius yesterday.
Oh, it's been kind of warm this week, but I think today the high is 30 or something like that Celsius. But yeah, not nearly as hot as what you've seen in Alberta this week.
Combines rolling?
Ours isn't, but a lot of the neighbors are. We do have some canola down in swaths as of this week. But like I said, things have the smoke and cool overnight temperatures, fog almost every morning. Things have really kind of come to a slow down, at least in terms of ripening off. And so the wheat that I thought would be ready like 10 days ago, we're still waiting for it to be ready.
Lyndsey, on the past number of weeks on the Farmer Rapid Fire, I've heard from the Ontario growers, hey, corn crop looks phenomenal. But Steve Twinstra followed it up yesterday again with, I'm a little bit concerned about where we are with heat units. And not saying we're not going to finish, but that is a little bit my worry with this really fantastic corn crop right now is, will we get to the finish line?
So, and I think it's a valid one for sure. We've got, yes, here in the East as well, a really good looking corn crop. But if you've been following along as well with Wheat Pete's Word, for whatever reason, we are 7 to 10 days, I think, behind perhaps the average in some areas, maybe only 3 or 4 days behind in some areas. But, depending on when your average frost date is, you start doing the math from tassel to black layer, and we could. So it's interesting though, because of course we've had lots of heat, but we had incredible smoke cover in June. We've had just so many rainy, cloudy days that, it's, a day is not a day, right? In corn. So it's that accumulation of those heat units. And yeah, I would definitely say that the crop is just not roaring along. Like it looks good, it's advancing, but it is a little behind. For sure. Well,
a good time to know, too, starting on Monday, which is Agronomic Mondays here on the show, where Wheat Pete has been joining, me for, numerous years on Monday's show. The audience have been quite concerned. I've had numerous. What happened to Wheat Pete? He's been on holidays, everybody. It's okay. He's back on Monday, and I'm going on vacation. So Lyndsey's going to be filling in for 2 full weeks. We think. I think I'm going to be able to stay away for 2 weeks.
Well, we're going to try it. So for sure, next week, the whole week, it'll be me. And I don't worry, everyone. I have Wheat Pete locked down for Monday's show.
He's back.
So he will be back.
He's back. People were quite concerned. I should have mentioned it.
You probably should have. Yeah.
Kudos to you, Shaun, for making Wheat Pete take holidays, because he's done that Monday segment from places he shouldn't have, or where his spouse maybe would have appreciated if he was actually on holidays while doing it.
Oh, full stop. I will fully admit I'm a part of the Don't Vacation Well Club. Pete's president.
That's a great way to put it.
There was one time where he was like, he's like, well, can we, because we record it sometimes, and Pete, he was like, well, can we do it a little bit earlier? And that'll be fine. That'll work. I'm like, okay, yeah, we're getting organized. And then I come to find out he didn't tell me about this, but he was actually on vacation in Mexico with his family. Mm-hmm. And I was like, no, we're not doing it. He's like, I want to do it. I'm like, no, we're not doing it. You're gone. And he's like, then he got mad.
Well,
I love Wheat Pete. I love Wheat Pete.
He is the quintessential extension person. right?
Yep.
It is, he feels a responsibility, and we love him for it, a responsibility to the growers. And yes, to miss a week is a lot for him. So we are all very proud that he and Sheila did head to Portugal. They got their whole clan together, 17 Johnsons, I think he said, under one roof. And so, yes, so they had a great time, but he'll be back. Don't worry, everybody.
He did not see Ronaldo. I did ask him that question. But anyway, this week who I did see was Lawrence MacAulay, Minister of Agriculture. He was in Calgary. He was at the CBIC conference, Canadian Beef Industry Conference, and he was shaking hands, taking pictures, gave an address to the delegates, which was, I'm not sure was planned or unplanned, but he was out on location. He also visited Davidson, Saskatchewan farmer Rob Stone, who was on the show yesterday. And gang, I asked Rob, what was the takeaways? What was your impression of what the minister saw on your farm? Here's what Rob had to say.
One of the things that I heard him say was that if we limit the way that people can produce, that's going to limit your economic opportunities, and that's just not good.
That seemed pretty profound, Kelvin. The question is, will there be follow through?
Yeah, that is the big question. And one of Lawrence MacAulay's greatest skills as a politician is visiting with people and making them feel like they have been listened to, and just that conversation that he has, whether it's on the trade show floor at the beef industry conference or visiting Rob Stone and having, I heard that he had the chance to drive Rob's combine.
He did.
That's pretty exciting. And I know, and just the fact that he is so willing to meet with people, and this is already his second trip to Western Canada, meeting with stakeholders in his first 3 weeks as in his second term here as agriculture minister. So he's extremely willing to meet with people and visit with them. And where the rubber hits the road, though, is in the follow through to a comment like that. And what does that mean when it comes to the cabinet meetings and raising the voice of agriculture and sticking up for policy that doesn't hurt farmers and things like that?
You know, Lyndsey, one of the things that I have heard from the audience of RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com through the summer here is questions or concerns, a level of anxiety, I guess would be a way to put it, in regards to what happens with the sustainable ag strategy. And I don't think there's a lot of clear direction yet if they should be more concerned with MacAulay in that role or less concerned about it with MacAulay in that role. But people that is on their minds.
Well, it absolutely is, and it should be. It's something that's relatively recent. It's just getting going. So, you know, is this something that is a priority for the ministry? And will MacAulay be given essentially the marching orders that it is something to carry forward and to push for? I think that, you know, even just this last conversation and Rob's comments about, you know, having him on farm, MacAulay is a diplomat, right? He's very diplomatic. He's very friendly. He's going to, you know, shake all those hands and all those sorts of things. You know, is this strategy something he's particularly interested or passionate about? If he's given leeway, if he's not, then I can see it very much floundering because it is unwieldy to a fault, right? It's 20 some organizations trying to come up with some strategy where you've got very differing opinions across the table of what it should even look like. You know, what is the point of it? So to me, it's going to come down to whether or not MacAulay personally feels that this is something he wants to champion, or if he's told he needs to champion it, because ultimately it's going to come down to, you know, does he have to or does he want to? At this point, I've never heard anything from him to say that this is something that he feels very passionate about, but it's pretty early on in him being reappointed as ag minister. So I think we should probably wait for maybe some clues from him if we don't get the mandate letter first.
Yeah, I think go ahead, Kelvin.
There's a tendency from I'd say Liberal MPs from the Maritimes, though, from Atlantic Canada, that they do have more of a business sense than some of the MPs from more central or west coast parts of the country in terms of and not having as much of an activist bent in their positioning and policies. I'll just make that comment.
I think it's a very accurate point for Kelvin.
It's why we have him. It's why we have him on.
Yeah, I think agriculture is going to, and I use that as just to encompass all stakeholders. I think agriculture is going to be self-disciplined, though. because we tend to we're so starved for attention. And when somebody does talk to us, we fall in love instantly. I'm not saying that the industry's fallen in love with the minister, but you know what I mean. There's this positive sort of spin because somebody talked to us. And we're going to have to the industry's got to be disciplined to make sure that we're still pushing forward and holding, in this case, the government accountable for what the interests are of the industry as a whole, or maybe the individual messages of those stakeholders. So it's going to be interesting to follow and see what the fall session brings. But Minister MacAulay definitely out on the road, meeting with producers and groups across the country. We got to take a break. We'll be back with more here on RealAg Radio on the RealAg Issues panel right after this.
Did you know that Pioneer now has a full lineup of Enlist E3 soybeans? Take a look at Pioneer brand Enlist E3 soybeans for the highest yield potential and for the best agronomic package and herbicide trait options. From the lab to the field, Pioneer brand Enlist E3 soybeans are the best in beans, period. Ask your local Pioneer representative about Enlist E3 beans.
Whether you're seeding, harvesting, or anything in between, the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com has you covered. Timely agronomic information from industry experts available online anytime. Give your wheat crop a good start and a great finish with the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com. Brought to you by C&M Seeds, Syngenta Canada, and the Alberta Wheat and Barley Commission.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio for the RealAg Issues panel. Low rate MB PT Solutions claim to protect nitrogen, but no imitator products delivers like Anvil Nitrogen Stabilizer, the next gen urease inhibitor from Koch Agronomic Services. See how others stack up to the proven power for Anvil at defendyourn.ca. RealAg Issues panel, Shaun Haney, Lyndsey Smith, and Kelvin Heppner, all of Real Agriculture. And here's another thing I'm picking up, gang. It is that even though some votes have passed in Ottawa on Bill C-282, now this is the one that prevents Canada from the future trading away market access for supply-managed commodities. Even though some votes have passed in Ottawa, the industry that is against this bill is not giving up. It came up a lot at CBIC this week. Happened to talk to the general manager for the Canadian Cattle Association, Ryder Lee. I asked him why they were fighting against it so hard, and whether or not this was just more about the votes in Quebec and Ontario than actual good trade policy. Here's what Ryder had to say.
You know, you got to climb into somebody's head to figure that one out. And when you look at Bloc versus Liberal versus Conservatives, you know, I think you can find some political stories there. But it's worse. It's not even you can't give any access. It's you can't talk about it, you know, effectively. And so generally our governments have went into these negotiations with that viewpoint that we're not giving up access on this, and they can continue to do that, and they've done that well, and where they haven't, they've been very generous in compensation. So that's a different scenario than your negotiating partner already knowing that you're not going to talk about this, and that's the hands tied piece of this. That's just bad management of your trade files.
Lyndsey, it is really bothering the CAFTA members, you know, the non-supply managed commodities. It is really bothering them that this is potentially going to become legislation.
Well, and as it should. And I think, you know, that last part there where he says about managing your trade files, right? Realistically, Canada is an export nation. We have a whole bunch of trade deals. We probably need to see some of them through and follow them a bit closer to actually be getting the most out of them. But I completely see from any commodity that is trade dependent, which is quite a few of them, where, you know, this bill potentially is problematic for a very long time. And that's part of the challenge in that, you know, I think that you talk to any trade dependent commodity and they'll always tell you that, we go into any sort of trade deal somewhat, at a disadvantage, let's say, from their perspective, because there's going to be this big, push and pull on supply management potentially. It becomes this big albatross that has to be sort of protected or not or whatever. And so then you get legislation that basically takes that off the table. Great for supply management, but where does that leave the trade dependent commodities? It doesn't really work to have a wholesome discussion if, what some people are asking for is going to be the little bit that is a bargaining chip, let's say. So from the supply management perspective, of course, everybody is like, wants to breathe a sigh of relief and be like, great, more of it won't be dealt away. But realistically, it wouldn't necessarily be. It's just a matter of this bill essentially taking it completely off the table. I think he's right. It puts any of our trade in just a different sort of light or any trade negotiation. And I don't know if it ultimately benefits us if we tie our hands.
Yeah. What I'm picking up on that note, Lyndsey, is that it's not just we wouldn't be allowed to trade the market access in the future. The other side knows our position and how we are stuck, and therefore that becomes, you're actually helping the other side in using leverage. And that, Kelvin, seems to be where a lot of the concern is here, leading into a potential renegotiation of NAFTA in 2026.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if this comes up how it applies to kind of the review of an existing deal, but in terms of new trade discussions, and that's something we probably should get some clarity on, whether this would apply to the USMCA review that is due in a couple of years. I do want to make the point, though, that it's not like no government can bind a future government in terms of legislation. So a future government could always change this law if it really wanted to in a trade negotiation. But like you said, it's the cards on the table now, and whichever country or jurisdiction you're negotiating with knows that it would be that much harder to make concessions on supply management, and there would be political costs and capital that would need to be expended on that. I wouldn't be surprised, though, if C-282 gets slow played. Kind of the puck, ragging the puck analogy might apply here when it comes to this bill in the Senate. It, of course, passed through the House of Commons with majority of MPs voting in favor back in spring. But in the Senate, there has to be a senator that speaks in favor and a senator that speaks against. And we've seen horse trading happen around this with many other bills, including Bill C-234, the carbon tax, the bill that would remove the carbon tax from grain drying and barn heating. We saw this happen with it back in spring as well, before the summer break, where a Liberal-affiliated senator didn't speak to it and held off on delayed speaking to it, and as a result, it didn't pass before the Senate rose for the summer break. I wouldn't be surprised if we see some of that happening here, because politically the points have been gained. All those Bloc MPs and Liberal MPs in Quebec and Ontario can say, "Hey, we voted in favor of it. We did our part." So some of the political value out of it has already been extracted, and if it hangs in limbo in the Senate and all of a sudden there's a prorogation or an election called and it slips off the order table, well, I don't think that's an completely unlikely scenario.
Well, and hey, on another note, the Dairy Farmers of Canada and their members, as an example, got what they wanted too. They have on the record, even on the conservative side of the aisle, a lot of high-profile conservatives voting for that bill as well. So you've got them on the record too, so it can be used against them going forward. So I think maybe everybody got what they wanted.
Well, it won't. The supply managed sector would certainly like to have this in legislation, and that lobbying continues. But yeah, I think that might be a kind of a compromise that gets reached if, and this all depends on whether there's senators that feel strongly enough about this to take this type of action. But yeah, we'll see in the coming months, I guess.
Yeah, and Lyndsey, the Prime Minister, has announced that he'll be holding a cabinet retreat in Charlottetown, PEI, coming up here on the 21st of August. Maybe we'll see some mandate letters out of that, maybe, potentially soon.
and maybe some photo ops of like roasting marshmallows. Anyway, whenever I hear retreat, all I can think about is like cabin in the woods and like singing. And anyway, I know that's not what it is, but that's what happens in my brain. So welcome here. Anyway, but yes, no, so of course, after the cabinet shuffle, a lot of new faces, and I think there's been a couple meetings, but this will be sort of a large scale getting together of this cabinet. Just ahead of, I guess, we hope to see Parliament sitting again. I guess we'll see on that one. And yeah, let's hope that from that or shortly thereafter, we might see some of these mandate letters. So we did mention, of course, what might be on MacAulay's list. We talked last week about what we want to see perhaps on that list. So we will be watching for that, and of course share it with our audience at RealAgriculture.com and here on the show. Yeah. So let's see. I think it wraps the 23rd next week. So
that's what we're okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good spot to go. It's a long ways for those MPs on the West Coast.
There will be some tough conversations, though. Anita Anand, who has been shuffled to be the Treasury Board president, has told her cabinet colleagues they need to find $15 billion in savings by October 2nd, which is something that a lot of these MPs and cabinet members aren't used to having to do that type of exercise.
Cut back spending? What? Why?
15 billion, y'all. And so far, I've heard from several of the MPs, they're like, well, sure, as long as it doesn't change delivery of services, as long as it doesn't impact. How do you find 15 billion and not change anything? I feel like that's not a thing. You're going to have to. Right?
The Senate Party says they can spend $15 billion and not change anything, but
exactly. How do you do it the other way?
Because it's coincidentally about the same amount that Volkswagen's getting for the new car.
Coincidence or not, Kelvin?
Well, there's all kinds of places you can find where the government's spending this type of money. Yes. It's just a matter, exactly. Where are they going to find?
Where are you going to find it?
And is it will potentially agriculture? Lawrence MacAulay might have to find some things to contribute in this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, that would be that would be right, like perfect, wouldn't it? Like, of all the fat to be trimmed in government spending, it would be totally like just to focus on agriculture as the area where some of these
focus. But I wonder. I bet every cabinet minister has pressure being applied to them to bring something to the table.
I do wonder.
Will environment have to? Will environment have to do?
That's a good question.
He's the golden boy, so maybe
not everybody at cabinet.
He's taking some heat this week with the China. What, Kelvin? Do you have any sort of background there on what's happened with Guibo and China? Just seen a lot of headlines this week.
He's headed to China for a meeting, and he's apparently on the board or an advisor to this organization that is focused on advancing environmental issues and causes in China. It's affiliated with the Chinese government, so that's where a lot of the criticism is here. Like, what is a Canadian cabinet minister doing, working closely and collaborating with the Chinese government on this? But I guess the counter argument is we keep saying, well, if Canada does it, a lot of critics of liberal environmental policy, of course, we say, well, Canada's just a small drop in the bucket. China's building X number of coal plants every week and coming online every week kind of thing. So I guess the counterpoint, and maybe Guibo's argument on this, is that, well, if we keep pointing the finger at China, maybe we need to do something to make China change. And I don't know, I guess he's optimistic that visiting China and cooperating with them is the approach to take. I think a lot of people would be quite skeptical that will actually be effective.
I have my hand in the air. I don't know if you can see it, but I'm in the skeptical club.
It's radio, Shaun.
It hasn't worked with a lot of other things.
You think?
So.
Maybe really? Maybe he'll climb a tower.
Oh, goodness gracious! Hey, before we take a break, I want to tell you. You've heard of greenwashing, okay? And we see all these companies, proclaiming their ESG commitments and net zero by this date and that date. And, oh yeah, they're doing this. We're going to do that. And this is kind of a race on the PR side of things. Well, now there's a new thing, good article in the Globe talking about green hushing. Oh, finally, this is like, it doesn't mean they're lowering their commitment to being sustainable partners with the global community or the Canadian community, but what they're doing is they're letting their actions talk, not necessarily their PR firm. This would be a positive, I think, Lyndsey.
Well, I guess it depends, and Kelvin maybe has more to say on this than I do. First of all, it really is, I think, the first time I heard the term green hushing. I love new words. This is fantastic. Or does it mean, I guess another way, and Kelvin, maybe you want to weigh in here, or does this mean that a certain level of the ESG, carbon capture, net zero, whatever, has just become table stakes, and really it's less about, investors needing to hear it, and it just becomes the expectation, and so we're moving on?
That is a part of it.
Or is it because of the standards, coming into play, that there's less playing fast and loose with some of these claims, and there's a little more, structure to what you can actually claim? I think that's probably a part of it. Kelvin, you had wanted to hop in here on this one before.
I just want to say, I have major respect for anybody that lives by the premise that actions speak louder than words. Show, don't tell. And if companies are doing that, good for them. I just wonder that if a lot of this has to do with those initial claims being unrealistic, and like you said, Lyndsey, not based in reality, or not being actually accomplishable. And we, of course, the way the financial accounting system works, and quarterly earnings reports and shareholder reporting having to happen and all that type of thing, companies have this incentive often to look at the short term, not the long term. And as the long term approaches and you realize we're not accomplishing our goals, maybe we should be quiet about not having accomplished what we said we were going to.
Yeah.
I think there's some of that reality setting in here.
And the reality of, Lyndsey mentioned table stakes, Wall Street not reacting as positively as they were to some of these messages from corporate clients.
They didn't believe them to start off with.
Well, and the consumer. And that may be one of the key pieces here. If you can attach some of this to demand, then you'd have people around that corporate board table saying, what are we exactly doing here? Okay, let's take a break. We got more of the RealAg Issues panel coming up right after this quick break here on Rural Radio 147.
Peter Johnson at Wheat Pete, RealAgriculture.com. I'm the host of The Word, and I love doing The Word. I love the questions. I love the challenges. I love having to apply agronomics to all over the globe and areas outside of my normal jurisdiction. Also, I love the feedback the most, where growers challenge me, tell me about their plot results, help me to learn. The Word, absolutely the best part of my day.
Canola is more than just a pretty face in the prairie landscape. It's a big business, both here and around the world, that requires you to be informed and up to date on everything it takes to grow a successful crop. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com has an expert library of video resources covering markets, agronomy, and more to help you grow a healthy and profitable canola crop. Visit canolaschool.com today. Brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio for the RealAg Issues panel with Lyndsey Smith, Kelvin Heppner, Shaun Haney. Kelvin, we got another round of earnings here on Wall Street, and I think a lot of the audience will be interested. Deere's earnings, positive.
Yeah, positive, coming in much larger than expected in terms of earnings per share. Wall Street was looking for earnings of something around $8.20 a share on equipment sales of $14.1 billion. And Deere this morning reported earnings per share of $10.20 and $14.3 billion in overall equipment sales. So, yeah, blowing through expectations there, at least on a per share basis. So, yeah, and this is in line with what we've heard from AGCO and CNH and Caterpillar, Bueller Industries. All these companies have had strong quarterly reports in the second quarter of 2023. The question, though, now I think shifts, and market is already looking to this as well, is how long does this last? Where are we at in the cycle? Is this the top?
It feels that way. There seems to be some indications of that. And what may be most at the top is not necessarily earnings, but it's pricing. That's what we continue to sort of hear. If you go through some of these earnings statements, pricing may be at the top, Lyndsey, which honestly, I think farmers are going to have a big sigh of relief if that's what happens.
Well, I mean, is this sort of similar, though, to like inflation slowing down, but it's still inflation over an inflated price? Like, yes, I think if price increases slow or even, plateau, great, but they've still sort of had that step change jump up like just about everything else. So I don't know if it adds all that much relief. At the same time, I also think it's not perhaps surprising that the outlook is this is probably, the peak and we either level off or start to perhaps pull back from here as far as earnings go, if only because, again, the inflation rates and these sorts of things, they take time to sort of work themselves into the market, and perhaps that's what we're seeing here as we move through the rest of the year here for sure.
There's some data out showing that dealers are also restocking inventory. That inventory amounts on dealer lots is increasing, and so I think what's good for Wall Street and shareholders isn't always what's good for farmers who are shopping for equipment. And so if there's more inventory on the local dealer's lot, that usually is a good sign for farmers in terms of the prices not climbing as fast.
Well, I'll tell you, dealers are the one caught in the middle, right? Management of your business in this kind of time, this is where cash is king, and you overbloat that lot with inventory and you are short on cash, that puts your dealership in a very compromised position. Sorry.
And they're going to be very careful with that in this environment.
I think so.
Very.
Borrowing costs where they are.
Mm-hmm.
Well, speaking of equipment, when it comes to the productivity and efficiency of your operation, every decision counts. One of those decisions is how you fuel your equipment. You need to be sure that it will run efficiently and without unnecessary downtime. Count on Co-op and your local Co-op fuel team to keep your equipment running smoothly with seasonally blended high-quality fuels and premium lubricants with guaranteed performance. We are Western Canada. We are Fueling Harvest. We are Co-op. Lyndsey, do you think that you comfortably... We're going to get personal here. I got a question for you. Do you think that you are comfortable being yourself?
Oh, goodness.
I'm going somewhere with this. So
I was wondering where you're going with this. I'm like, you know what? Sure, yes, now. But definitely I think that is a process. I think that is definitely something that takes time. And I would like to think by this time in your life, as we approach mid-40s, if you're not, you got some work to do. So let's put it that way.
Well, I have a surprise for Kelvin. This week I interviewed Brian Burke, former general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs, and he addressed the crowd at CBIC. And this is one of the things that he talked about was being yourself and just letting the chips fall and not apologizing. Here's what Brian Burke had to say.
Well, I think it starts off with the way I was raised by my parents. We were taught to speak our mind, and like I said on the story before, my grandma told us, don't ever start fights, but finish every single one of them. So I think it's a combination of that. And I played for Lou Lamoriello, worked for Pat Quinn, and worked for Gary Bettman. I think all of those guys had an influence on me where people were, okay, if you have the conviction of your beliefs, speak forcefully and don't back down. So I think over time you acquire that. And I've reached a point now where I don't care if people agree with the message or like it or not.
Kelvin, is that what your mom taught you? Was don't start fights but finish them?
I don't know if she said it as strongly as what Brian Burke said there, but he certainly, that's what he's come to be known for, and certainly is well respected for that. And you mentioned him as the general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs. He was also general manager of a few other important teams to our fan bases, or to our audience as well. Other fan bases out there: Vancouver, Anaheim, Calgary, Pittsburgh, as of till earlier this year. So yeah, pretty cool that you got to hear speak with him. I'm looking forward to listening to that interview, and jealous. I'm sure he had many great stories. He's just one of the epic, legendary characters in the world of hockey right now.
Yeah, interesting. We get to interview at some of these conferences some people outside the industry once in a while, and that could be, like the time that you interviewed Brian Mulrooney, Lyndsey. Who was the
Romeo Dallaire?
Romeo Dallaire.
That's what I'm thinking of. Yes, thank you. That's exactly what I was thinking of. That was the time where he said, in order to deal with some of his pain, he smokes weed. Before it was legal. A lot of times you're pleasantly surprised getting to meet the person. Sometimes you are epically disappointed in terms of I really never need to meet that person ever again. And sometimes you are just so blown away by someone's genuineness. And that's the feeling I got from Brian Burke. He was tremendously generous with his time with me, as well as many of the delegates. So check out his book, Burke's Law, and we'll have my interview with him posted at RealAgriculture.com shortly for sure. And, Lyndsey, on this note of being yourself, I think it's, and this is one of the things that Brian and I talk about in the interview. It's easy once you get to that stage where you really don't care what people think. But as you're rising up in your career and, working from your 20s to your 30s to your 40s and then into your 50s, how you have different equity levels with stakeholders, right? And your reputation speaks for yourself positively or negatively. This is a progression for people to be able to deal with other people in this agricultural community, to provide influence or discussion points. It just doesn't happen on day one.
It doesn't, but I think being intentional about these things, I think that you can, even early in your career or and wherever that might be in age, I think if you think about that from his perspective of, don't start fights, but finish them, being true to who you are, having that firm foundation. I think that you perhaps, yes, maybe you don't say as much earlier on, or perhaps you listen more, but I honestly think that's probably good advice all the way through. And realistically, figuring out what matters to you, what's important to you, valuing your integrity and speaking your mind. If you do it in a respectful way, I don't know that, you have to be super worried about where it lands. That being said, it's true. The further we get into our career, there are times where, we understand what the follow-up might be, and perhaps we're just willing to take that on because, we're established at where we need to be. And so, but honestly, if I were thinking about, someone starting their career, I think it's just good advice to listen perhaps more than you say, but always say what you mean and just do so respectfully.
Yeah. I got the sort of the hint that, some of the messaging that Burke had, a lot of the delegates in the audience, and Sherry Copperthorne was the host in the fireside chat. This is advice the beef industry should be taking. Far too many times the industry is attacked, and we don't battle back. We sort of back down. And I think there was a little bit of, I think some of the people in the audience took Burke's messaging kind of to hold Kelvin and hey, we need to do more of this.
Yeah, it depends how you do it. It comes down to two people can say the exact same thing, and one is convincing to the other side, and one just increases the distance and that gap between them. We saw this, of course, over the last couple of years with pandemic policy and all the divisions and polarization that happened there. We see it in politics today with all the partisanship and increasing in that gap between the two sides. It all depends how you, like Lyndsey said, say what you mean, say what you believe. But there's different ways of saying it, and I don't know if Burke's the best example at always having he did challenge another general manager to a fight in a barn in rural Alberta, I believe, right? Did he tell that story?
No, he didn't.
Because I'm not sure he's always the best example at that, but yeah, he certainly is a prime example of standing up for what you believe in.
Well, what did the guy say?
Yeah, and the beef industry, all agriculture should do that. Well, him and Kevin Lowe.
Well, I'd get in a fight with Kevin Lowe too. Come on.
Him and Kevin Lowe. There's a story about him and Kevin Lowe, general manager of the Edmonton Oilers, challenging each other to they're professional NHL executives. Oh, yeah, I don't know all the details well enough to repeat it here, but
how's that on Instagram?
Man. Oh, I'm sure it is. It's been all over.
Probably somewhere.
Okay, we're at time. Hey, Lyndsey, have yourself a great weekend.
You too.
Kelvin, all the best.
Thank you. Have a good weekend, everyone.
Okay, audience, I'm taking off. So I'm going on vacation, but I want you to send your feedback, and we'll make sure that host Lyndsey gets it. You can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also call the Real Ag feedback line, 855-776-6147. Thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with Real Ag Radio, and we will chat again next week. Cheers, everybody.